Chapter 10. Chapter 10 is focusing on marketing. Now, marketing is typically one of the largest expenses any organization faces because it includes selling, advertising, and distribution. Marketing determines the reach of your audience. How expansive will your market be? How many people will you reach with your message? So in that, we talked about selling expenses. Now, selling expenses include anything to get your product to your end user. So your selling expenses can be a pretty big budget item because that also includes the hiring of people, additional staff needed in order to fulfill orders or to sell a particular product. Your selling expenses include your distribution outlets, your methods that you're using, your source of sales, how you get your inquiries depending on your nature of your business. So it can be a very large pool that you are using to make sure that you get the product to the end user. Now, in your marketing budget, there's also your advertising and your sales promotion. Now, these are the vehicles that are used to spread your message. So this item includes your door-to-door solicitations, your direct mail, your Google searches, your online marketing, of course, your television campaigns, billboards. These would go into this particular area or arena. And then, of course, there's your distribution expenses. Now, if your company is a service-based company, then your distribution expenses are lessened. May not be eliminated, but typically are lessened. Your distribution expenses will include packaging, transportation, warehousing, etc. When I say that, depending on what business you're in, it may not be eliminated totally because your business may be a transportation-based business like a limo service. And at that point, then that'll be a part of your distribution expense because you would be transporting your customer at that point. That'll be a part of your expense in that area. So this area of your marketing budget includes these three phases, which typically makes up a huge portion, sometimes up to 30% of a budget. Chapter 11 is focusing on R&D, and it's the budget for long-term planning. Research and development is vitally important for sustainability and advancement. R&D is important because without it, you can't stay competitive. You have to be able to develop new products and services and improve existing products and services in order to remain competitive. Research and development should always be directed toward the future and with an emphasis on growth rather than just sustainability. As your competition grows and gets more aggressive and more innovative, you as a player in that market must do the same. But you don't want to just do exactly what they do because then you always run behind where they are. You want to be able to look toward the future to figure out where that market you're in is going and what type of investment will it take from an R&D perspective in order to maintain or to gain a competitive edge. Now, there's several costs that are associated with R&D. Personnel, depreciation, supplies and materials, property taxes, travel, professional memberships, subscriptions to professional journals, etc. There are a ton of expenses that can be associated with R&D. Now, R&D takes a lot of planning, and it takes the efforts of a lot of people because R&D is a part of your long-term strategy, and your long-term strategies always include high levels of leadership. When you're planning for research and development, you have to look at every detail of that R&D product cycle to determine its viability and its worth, because every phase has a cost. Now let's look at these phases. Idea generation, probably the least expensive of these particular costs. Idea generation is the beginning of the product development cycle. And then you have to look at a feasibility analysis. This takes time and effort, because then you have to do some of the data analysis that we've learned about in chapter 13 and chapter 20, where we were looking at values. How feasible is this? We have to look at the projected net present value, the projected accounting rate of return, what would be the payback period. So all these kind of things we'll look at. Then we have to look at things like specifications and processes and prototype development. If we're building and developing a product, it may not be a prototype if it's a service. We still have to go through these same types of steps when you're thinking about developing anything, even if it is a service. The design review, testing it in the market, and then the product introduction. How do you introduce it to the market? What does that look like for you? And then continuously following up and evaluating it. And you're making improvements throughout. As long as you're going to follow up and evaluate it, as long as you have that product and or service in place. Now your R&D budget is based on these following factors: your estimated cost of this project or projects, your percent of expected sales, the percent of current year and or prior year sales. Once again, it's that continuous evaluation. The percent of profit, operating income, and cash flow. A percent of capital asset investment. Look at that's an investment. So what percent of that investment are you getting a return on, and what is that return? And of course, you're looking at the product life cycle. How long or is your life cycle for this particular product? Is it very short, or is it a long cycle? And if it is a long cycle, then what's going to be your return over the length of that time? If it's a short cycle, what's the return over that length of that time? You want to make sure that, and when I say short, I'm looking relatively speaking. We're still talking about 10, 15 years, but Coca-Cola has a product that lasts hundreds of years. And certain other products may have a product or a service that they only want to run for 10 or 15 years as a baseline. So you just got to figure out what the product life cycle is for your particular area. Just like every other aspect of business, there is risk, and you have to be able to evaluate that risk objectively and decide whether it's worth it. You want to look at past, current, and future projections, especially if you have something similar in your product line, or if your competition has something similar to this. Then you want to see how viable this is for your particular business. You want to look at your funds that you're using. You don't want your R&D budget to be so high that it cripples what you're able to do day to day. So you have to have a balance, and this has to be something that your leaders, plural leaders, are a part of this decision-making process. You want to look at your R&D expenditures, and it has to be able to conform within your budget limitations. You can have a great idea, it can be a big need, but if you can't do it at this point, then you have to decide what will it cost you in terms of opportunity cost not to do it. And then if you decide to do it, then what needs to happen in your current budget in order to make that happen. And of course, if you have a flexible budget, then you have that wiggle room. Now chapter 12, we're looking at general and administrative costs. We're trying to maximize productivity. Now, as you may know, in any business, that's not necessarily true, but most businesses, your general and administrative costs are typically your largest costs. Those are your costs for employees. Your employee costs, personnel costs, are typically the largest budget item for any organization. and they're usually established in using two methods, which are both difficult to plan and control. They're established based upon a percentage of revenue. So you will be able to set what you're able to pay people that you have on staff and who you're able to hire based on the revenue that you brought in. Or you're able to base it based on historical data, your historical need during certain seasons. You'll see this a lot with departmental stores that have flexible staff during certain seasons, where they ramp up hiring with the anticipation that Christmas is coming, so they'll need more sales staff during this time. But then in the spring and the summer, then they'll reduce their staff back, and that's based on historical data and based on trend data, so they know that information going forward. Now, headcount forecasting is a method used to forecast need over a certain time period. You'll see on page 240, you'll see the algorithm used in order to forecast. This will be a question, or maybe a question on your final exam, but you won't have to do any problems using this. So I would just be familiar with what factors are in this particular algorithm. Now here's a question. What can be some indicator targets to determine need for additional staff in your organization or unit? I want you to think about that. But of course I'll have to give you the answer because we're not in an actual classroom environment. Some of the factors that you will see would be growth, of course, but not just growth in terms of growth overall in a particular company, but growth in a particular unit. Expansion, the decision to take the product line from 4 or 5 products to 10 or 15 products. Another indicator may be turnover. If your company cannot hold on to certain staff members, then there may be a need to always have, as I would term, a bullpen. That you're going to be looking for additional staff because the nature of your business is high turnovers. You see this a lot in sales, especially high impact sales like car sales. You'll see that there's continual hiring, and that happens at a very consistent basis. So you always want to have staff ready to step in when there's a need. This, like any other cost that we've discussed in this course, you want to be able to analyze and evaluate. And I said document, extremely important. You want to be able to evaluate costs by its type. And I asked the question, why is that important? Well, the answer is it's important because you want to be able to pair a particular expense item with a certain revenue item, if at all possible. You want to be able to justify the expense of a particular person based on the revenue that that person brings in, or that person assists in bringing in, even if that person is not a part of the revenue generating team, even if that's a cost center. But you want to be able to justify that cost and relate that cost to some revenue point. And of course you want to control costs where at all possible. There has to be a balance between costs and sales, and you want to be able to eliminate duplicate unnecessary activities or responsibilities. A lot of time cross training is very important, and you'll see that many organizations are going to what's known as lean these days, and lean is really huge in Six Sigma, where that is a focal point of sustaining and maintaining viable business. So in order to be as lean as possible and to be as effective as possible, you have to always evaluate and analyze, control your costs at all times, and you want to be able to assign responsibilities and control your processes throughout, not just when you first hire someone, but throughout their tenure at your organization.